Hi, my name is Dong. I'm a Canadian animator based in Japan. While I mainly work with pencil and paper, I will use OpenToonz to animate digitally when I have to work remote. This video will hopefully help those that are starting to use OpenToonz for the first time. Note that this is designed for intermediate level animators who already have a grasp on the fundamentals of animation, and this guide will be more focused on the software itself. We will animate a simple head turn of the character Natsume from the Decadence anime, which I recently finished animating on. I've been drawing this character for the past year and a half, but feel free to use your own characters. We will have the character look screen right before turning to look straight ahead. We will do one of the simplest head turns possible, with only 4 drawings exposed on series. Let's start up OpenToonz and create a new project and give it a name. I will call it Head Turn. I like to check append scene path to the drawings, as this creates a folder for the drawings of every scene instead of the software just dumping our drawings in the same folder. Now that the project is created, let's create our scene. Give it a name. We can leave the camera size on 1920 by 1080, but I personally prefer to use this layout template, especially for professional work. Find a link for it below if you'd like to use it. This is A4 size at 200 dpi. So I will set the scene as 2338 pixels by 1653 pixels. Click the Add button to create a template for quick use later. Keep the frame rate at 24 and click Create Scene. I can drag my template into column 1 of the X sheet, also called the exposure sheet or timeline by some, and drag to increase the exposure. Right-click on the column 2 area and create a new level. I work with raster graphics, so I make sure that the type is set as Toonz raster level. Now let's start rough animation. We can grab the brush tool on the left, and on the options bar near the top, we can adjust the minimum and maximum sizes as well as other parameters. I like to use a minimum size of 3 and a maximum of 6 with the pressure checked. The hotkey for the brush tool is B. So nothing too complicated here, just draw out the character's poses, keep the drawings loose, rough, and quick. This is meant to be rough animation, and we will put everything on model later on. Mainly focus on volumes and structure. When you need to erase, use the eraser tool. The shortcut for it is E. One advantage with working digitally versus on paper is the ability to use the selection tool and drag different parts of the drawing around to adjust their position and sizes. Okay, with our starting keyframe poses roughed, we can draw our ending keyframe pose. We can enable the onion skin tool by clicking above or below the red and green ball towards the left of the X sheet. We can adjust the onion skin in the preferences. Lowering the paper thickness will darken the drawing, while increasing it will lighten it. Now, like with the previous drawing, we will rough out the second pose. The idea is the same, draw and adjust the pose with the selection tool when needed. Make sure the character's head isn't changing size and that the volume and structure remain consistent. My character's head was getting too big, so I can scale it down with the selection tool. Hold the shift key while dragging with the selection tool to keep the proportions consistent, and the alt key to have the drawing scale using the center point as a pivot. With the drawings in the X sheet selected, we can use the up and down arrows to flip through our drawings. I am also going to draw in an intermediate breakdown drawing between the first and last pose. I don't want the middle poses to be straight in-betweens, and this drawing will help break up and guide the movement, making it more interesting. I also want the middle pose to have the eyes be closed, as when humans turn their head to something in attention, they blink. With the onion skin activated, I will make sure the pose is directly in the middle of the other two poses, both spatially and temporally. With those done, let's label our drawings. The first keyframe will be A1, and I will circle that. The second drawing will be A2. I will draw a triangle to indicate that it is a breakdown drawing and not a keyframe. With our third drawing, I will label it as A3 and give it a circle. I will write end to indicate that it is the last drawing. I will also draw our in-between diagram. The A2 drawing will be dead center with another in-between drawing between A2 and A3 indicated by this dash. This is an optional step, but I like to plan out my animation on a timesheet. Find a link for this below if you would like to use it. I did a video series on how to write these, but in general, on the left we have a column for our rough animation. Under the A column, I will write the numbers of the drawing and how long to expose each frame for. So I will have A1 exposed for 24 frames here, or 1 second, A2 for 3 frames, as we are animating on series, the in-between for 3 frames, and A3 exposed until the 48th frame mark, or 2 seconds. I will then mark it off at 48 frames to indicate the end. We can go back and match the exposure of the drawing in OpenToonz to what we have in our timesheet. Click on the drawing in the X sheet and drag the tab out to extend the exposure. Match it to the timesheet and click play. After rough animation, I would do a tie down pass. This is still rough animation, but here we would put the characters on model, and this will assist whoever is doing cleanup and in-betweens for our animation. Let's create a new level on column 3. Then clicking on the down facing arrow on column 2, we can lower the opacity of the level. Now back on column 3, we can start drawing. Think of the tie down process like a quick cleanup. We use our brush tool, and using our rough as a base, we draw with a much more of a focus on keeping the drawing on model and making the line work cleaner. We also need to figure out the shadows and highlights with color separation lines. We will create several new colors by clicking the level palette and creating a new style. We need at least 3 other colors: red, blue, and light blue. The red marks different areas of color and will be painted over, as well as to indicate highlight areas. For example, this would be the whites of the eyes and the highlights of the pupil and hair. I also made a light gray color style so that I can use it as a rough line to be erased later. To erase specific colors, with our eraser tool, have the selective option checked, which will allow us to only erase the color style we have selected. Also note that with the brush tool, we can specify the order that the lines are drawn, with options for underall, overall, and palette order. Since we want the black line to be on top, it is best to set this as either underall or palette order. Now we take the blue line and do the same but for the shadows. Then I will take the light blue color, make the brush bigger, and paint in the shadows. Note that you can change the color and all instances of that color will be updated. We can hide the rough drawing by clicking on the orange camera stand visibility toggle. Now let's continue the tie down process for the remaining drawings. Make sure to tie down the keyframes first, and use the onion skin and flipping with the arrow keys to help you out. Once that is done, make sure everything is labeled and flip through your drawings to make sure everything is working properly. For professional work, I would generally spend much longer on this stage to get my drawings to be much more polished. But for what we are doing right now, this is fine. The next step is cleanup. But before we start, let's go back to our timesheet and in the middle column, reorder the drawings for the cleanup. A1 and A2 will remain A1 and A2. The in-between drawing will be A3, and the rough A3 drawing will become the new cleanup A4 drawing. Now it's cleanup time, so let's create a new level. Colors do not carry over different levels, so we can copy and paste from the tie-down level. Lower the opacity of the tie-down layer to make it easier to work with. For this scene, I will be using a size 2 brush with the pencil option checked. This will give us a crisp, un-anti-aliased line. Also, I will use a geometry tool set to the arc option at the thickness of 2. I recommend using the geometry tool to create long, clean lines. Use the brush tool for things that are hard to draw with the geometry tool. Cleanup is a very serene experience. You don't have to think too much while you're drawing, but make sure to keep the drawings on model. Do this for the 3 drawings we have already tied down. We have one drawing we need to in between, A3. It is directly in the middle of A2 and A4, so let's extend drawing A2 by a frame and create a new drawing. There are several techniques to help with in-betweens. Some of them take a bit of time to teach, but a simple method is to just do a rough underdrawing first. So with the gray color and onion skin enabled, we can rough it out. Once that is done, we can go back to using the black geometry arc line tool to draw the in-between drawing. Make sure to use the onion skin and flip between the other 2 drawings. With the eraser tool and the selective option checked, we can erase our rough line. Once that is done, flip through to make sure everything works. Also, to prepare for coloring, go back and make sure that there isn't any gaps in our lines and fix any other outstanding issues. Now let's color our drawings. There are several ways to do this, but the simplest is to just eyeball it. Right-click on the level palette and create a new style for each color that we're going to paint. I like to start with highlights, then shadows, then midtones. I'm going to create the color for the highlights of the nose first. We will then take the fill tool, the shortcut is F, and make sure that the mode is set as areas and the auto paint lines option is checked. Then, for our blue and red styles, our color separation lines, right-click and select Style Editor. Go to the Settings tab and enable Auto Paint for lines. This will have the software automatically paint the lines as we use the fill tool. The highlights for the hair needs to be painted over, so we create the color style for it and use the paintbrush tool, not to be confused with the brush tool, and make sure that the mode is set to lines and draw over the red lines to paint them. For the rest of the colors, just create the style and fill them in. We can always adjust the color values at a later time. If there are any gaps in the lines, fill them in with the black line. When adjusting the colors, we can use the Style Picker tool, shortcut K, to quickly select the color style and adjust it. Oh yeah, also the designs of Natsume has the lines of her pupils painted, so I would just do that with the paintbrush tool. We continue this process for the other drawings. Once everything is painted, we have to check for white spots that are not painted. One way to do this is to go to View and enable the transparency check. This makes seeing the white areas easier. Take the Style Picker tool to sample the color next to the unpainted area and use the Fill tool to paint it in. You can change the type of the Fill tool to rectangular, and this allows you to draw a box around the unpainted areas to quickly paint them. Take your time to make sure any outstanding issues with the drawings are resolved. Now that everything is done, we can time out our scene based on the timesheet and then we can export it. To export, open the output settings under Render, Since I use the layout template, I can export it in its full size, or I can change the camera so that the scene can be exported in a more common resolution like 1920 by 1080. Select the camera column in the X sheet and grab the Animate tool. Use the scale and position options to match the camera to the size of the rectangular frame of the layout template. Before we export, let's enable the anti-aliasing option for the level. So right-click Columns First Drawing and select Level Settings. Check Add Anti-aliasing and adjust the softness and subsampling values. These are what I use. When we click the preview button, which looks like an eye, it will render the frame. Make sure to turn off the preview visibility toggle button on the X sheet for the other levels. That button also looks like an eye. Let's open up our output settings again. By default, it will save in the output folder of our project directory, but you can change this if you want. You can also change the file type it saves as. For something quick and dirty, you can just use AVI or MOV to create a movie file, but I prefer to export it as a PNG sequence and put it together in After Effects or something, as it gives me more control over the bitrate and other aspects. Anyways, hit render.
If you can't find your output folder, look for your project in the OpenToonz stuff folder, which by default is created in your Documents or the root C drive.
And there you have it, a quick and simple head turn. Remember this, as you will probably have to draw many scenes involving a character turning their head if you ever go pro. You can also try to spice it up by using a different timing, or try animating on twos instead of threes. Anyways, tune into the channel as I further explore the individual features of OpenToonz in depth.
Follow me on Twitter as I post a lot of behind the scenes work there, and support me on Patreon if you like. See you next time.